let's get back to that simplicity. So now we know what when we're talking about the one God and the questions and how Aquinas really starts to break it down and how he's approaching, and I would even say how he's wrestling with these understandings, right? But he does start with this whole concept of, okay, if we're going to talk about God, we have to talk about, maybe approach it from this understanding, ruling out the things. And one of the first things, literally the first thing he begins to tackle is this understanding of divine simplicity. You know, are we talking about a Lego God here that we can piece together, or what are we dealing with here? So is God a Lego set?
God is not a Lego set. And I think, again, just to kind of further motivate or further inspire interest in the question, it is important to rule out this kind of piecemeal notion of God, because anytime you have piecemealitude, you've got limitation. And whenever you've got limitation, you've got not God. All right? Now, there are ways in which God is limited just, as it were, prior to considerations of who God is and what God does. It's like, can God make a square circle? No, because it's logically and thus metaphysically, or it's metaphysically and thus logically impossible. So we're not talking about limitation in that sense. We're just talking about like God, who is all-knowing and who is all-causing, right? He himself is not limited by some kind of arbitrary constraint. And so it's helpful to rule out the ways in which God might be limited by our false understanding, importing a false being, right? Which might then lead us to think like, oh, when I exercise my free will, for instance, God can't be involved in that. Otherwise, it's determined or fated. It's like, no. We're doing the legwork to appreciate the type of stuff which transpires in those conversations. So the actual question 3 itself is composed of 8 articles. And a lot of them are the types of things that you might only be interested in if you're interested in Platonic and Aristotelian philosophical notions or philosophical categories.
If you're interested in Plato, see the episode that we have on Plato's dialogues, which, yes, it's really, really fascinating. Father Bonaventure, Father Patrick, awesome episode there. So check that one out, and we'll go from there. But yes, we're dealing with Plato, Aristotelian philosophy, and wrestling with this understanding of the deity in that way.
And so St. Thomas is entertaining the various ways in which a thing can be or could be composed, and he's just ruling them all out. Right? So like Article 1 is whether God has a body. The answer is no. But here's the thing. When we're reading sacred scripture, he's talking about like earth being his footstool. Does that entail him having feet? Or like he speaks of his mighty arm. Or does he have arm? It's just like there are various ways in which, and then when God appears, especially like in the Old Testament, sometimes it's after the manner of a visible being. Right? Think in Genesis 18, the visit of these 3, whatever they are, and Abraham and Sarah are entertaining them, at table.
Being hospitable.
So what's going on?
Feeding.
And then the question of the incarnation is a separate question, and the metaphysics of that are wild. But we had a conversation with Professor Michael Gorman about that, so people can refer to the Annals of History, or they can refer to
you mean our catalog of episodes, not the Annals of History, the catalog of episodes, which is part of the Annals of History. Anyway, moving on.
So, but he'll say, for instance, like in a lot of these distinctions, what's at stake is you've got potency and you've got act. For those not familiar with the language, potency means the capacity to be fully or be wholly that's not yet realized, right? So we would say like, let's say I've got a pitcher of water here. All right. Or let's say that I've got a kettle of water. And at this state, it's, 72 degrees. It's room temperature. But it's in potency to be hot, or it's in potency to be heated. Because I could put it on the burner, and I could turn that burner up to 10, and I could wait the appropriate, 3 to 5 minutes, and it'd boil. So it's in potency to be 212 degrees Fahrenheit or 100 degrees Celsius, right? Because that can be realized, or that can be actualized in it.
But at this time, it's not. So it's in potency.
Exactly.
At this moment,
So typically when we look at created reality, we make this distinction between potency and act. But what St. Thomas is going to say all along the way is there's no potency in God. There's no coming to be in God, right? There's no further actualization to be had in God. God's not getting better. God's not improving, because God, his very nature is to be.
Just is.
His very nature is to be. He is being itself, subsisting through itself.
Yeah.
So he's gonna distance any like notion of potency, any notion of incompletion or imperfection from God, so that we come to a deeper appreciation of who he is, and then what he does, how he relates to
how he
creation.
Relates to it. Yeah.
Father Bonaventure, if you had the choice between holding a toad and subscribing to a YouTube channel, what would you choose?
Subscribe to a toad holding a YouTube channel.
Oh my gosh. Please subscribe to a toad holding a YouTube channel, especially if it's ours. Cheers.